Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Make sure that we are live. So glad to be with everyone today. I am Dr. Tony. I am a mom of four. I am an educator, a speaker, an author, success mentor, and leadership mentor as well. So glad to be here with you today. So if you've been following me for a little while, you know that what really matters to me is that we understand that we are all multifaceted, right? Like I am not born to just work. I'm also not born to just be mom. Like I have multifacets of myself. I am mother. I am also a psychotherapist. I am also mentor. I'm also speaker. I'm also wife and friend and daughter and XYZ. I am multifaceted. So are you. You have many facets to yourself, right? And so often what I hear people struggling with that are trying to navigate their businesses or their careers, plus parenting, plus marriage or dating, they're trying to navigate all of the things and have a social life. And they're like, how in the world do I juggle all of this? Like, there's so many things pulling me in so many directions. And the thing is, if there are so many things that are trying to pull you in so many different directions, then probably we're not coming to the table with an understanding that all of these different pieces are aspects of who we are. And so they don't need to be pulling us from one to another to one to another. No, at any given moment, we may choose to be focusing on one particular facet, but we are always multifaceted, always, always, always multifaceted. We are not born, we are not meant to pretend that we are just one particular facet of who we are, right? Otherwise, that leaves us feeling like we're neglecting all these other facets of who we are. No, we need to embrace and understand that we're multifaceted, okay? So I want to talk today about how to juggle being this modern day parenting professional, whether you're an entrepreneur or a leader in your career, whatever it might look like for you and what you're juggling as a parent, as a partner, as a professional. So many people ask me, Tony, I don't understand. How did you write a book and have a baby and move and buy a house and sell your house and also run two businesses and get a puppy and still have a marriage? Like, how do you do all of that? How it doesn't make any sense. How do you juggle it all? Right? Maybe you have asked yourself that question too, like, how in the world am I supposed to juggle it all? How in the world am I supposed to be 10 places at once? How in the world am I supposed to do it all of the time? How in the world am I supposed to show up for all of these things all of the time? Listen, I get it. Meetings to attend, teams to manage, kids to corral, meals to make, home to clean, partner to communicate with and spend time with. How in the world does a parent who's also a partner and a driven professional get ahead in this day and age? Is it even flipping possible, right? Like, it's a question that all leaders have asked themselves at some point or another. And as we're juggling the roles and responsibilities of being parent, of being partner, of being professional, we are bound to ask ourselves that question, because if we're feeling like we're juggling a bunch of balls in the air all at once, then we're going to be worried that we're going to drop something. Juggling is not a good feeling when we apply it to life and all of the important things that are in it, right? For me, I'm a mom of four. I'm also a multi-business owner. I'm a wife. I understand why so many moms, dads, entrepreneurs, business owners, corporate leaders, why they are asking this question, how to juggle it all. As a modern day parent in this world, in this day and age, how do we juggle it all? I get why we're asking that question, especially when the answers or the tips that they are getting to that question, they're just not cutting it. Like, they'll try it out, the tips that they get or the advice that they get, and they're like, this is not working. Or maybe it works for a small iota of a moment, and then you're like, nope, this is not working, right? So let's let's talk about this, okay? Because I think we need to break it down a little bit. And it's actually not as complicated as it may seem at the surface level. When we're trying to figure out how to juggle it all, some people, they actually keep their difficulties with juggling it all, they keep it a secret so that it looks like everything is balanced and everything is well all the time, even when it's not. And what that does is it leaves them feeling really alone and isolated, because other people think they're fine when they're not. Other people think they're balancing all when they're like, actually, I feel like I'm barely floating above water, like I can barely keep my head up, right? And then there's other people who maybe are asking others about how they are balancing work, marriage, and parenting, and they're trying to take those tips and advice in, but it's not working for them, right? So whether you're keeping it a secret and it's leading to a sense of isolation, which contributes to the stress of the juggling act, or whether you are asking others for advice, and getting their responses back, and then finding that, those responses aren't working because they're saying like, do this, it worked for me, or, this is just how it is. So you just got to deal with it. It'll get better over time. Just wait it out, right? Those kinds of answers that aren't really helpful. All of those things are well-intentioned, right? Like you have good intentions behind not talking about your challenges all the time. You have good intentions behind asking for advice and trying some of those tips on. So while all those things are good intentioned, and it is helpful sometimes to share ideas with others about things that have or haven't worked for them, it's unlikely that if you continue doing both of those things that haven't been working for you, that they're going to just suddenly start working for you, right? It's also unlikely that the specific thing that worked for someone else is just going to work for you and to work for everyone. Different things work for different people. So there is truth in knowing that life happens in seasons, for sure. And so certain conditions, they are going to change over time, but that truth isn't necessarily going to help you with feeling like you can better navigate all of the things that you're juggling and feeling stressed about or stretched thin about, right here, right now in this season of life. So these cumulative difficulties of trying to figure it out, trying to navigate all things, feeling like you're juggling, asking for help or not asking for help, all these things, they accumulate, right? And becomes more and more challenging, more and more difficult. It just adds to the frustration of trying to figure out what to do next, or even having the energy or the time or the motivation to try to implement something to do next. Even if you're the most ambitious out there, right? Listen, I had my third child, my PhD, owned my home and my car all by the age of 30. I get ambition, right? I've written 2 books, a solo book, a co-authored book. I have other books down the pike, right? Like I get having ambition, okay? So you could be the most ambitious, the most driven person, and also still need some support around navigating how to quote unquote juggle it all in a way that's actually effective for you. Okay. I know recently for me, I've been doing a ton of speaking engagements and things like that. And so during one of those speaking engagements, this was on a podcast, I was asked a question by the host, and he said something like, can you tell us how you juggle it all, being a mom, running your business, but also just being present for your family and yourself? And what I said might sound really frustrating because it might sound too simple. But what I said was with intentionality. And I found myself saying this multiple times just within the past week with other folks that have asked me the same question. And it's so true. Intentionality. It is so very true. Intentionality is a way of approaching your days, your relationships, your way of being in a specific way, which means it can be custom molded to work for anyone because the specifics will be personalized to you. The intention is set by you, through you, for you, not from some cookie cutter perspective that someone else puts out there. Here's the formula, do it this way, right? But what does that even mean? Like, okay, Tony, whatever, that sounds kind of confusing. What do you mean by that? I hear you. I get it. I would have rolled my eyes on that, like say 6 years ago. Okay. So if that's where you're at, that's okay. Figuring out how to be more intentional in a way that's actually effective, it can feel really confusing and ever elusive. Like you just keep trying, and it's just not going anywhere. Like you're on that hamster wheel. And that's really frustrating. So we don't want that for you, right? We don't need more confusion. That's definitely not helpful. And so adding more confusion to your day is not what I'm aiming for here today. All right. I don't want to make things more frustrating for you. I want to make things less frustrating for you, which is why we're having this conversation today. I actually wrote an article about this too, and I'll link that below. And I have an intentional scheduler to support you with this so that you can implement it in a personalized and practical way. I'll also link that below, okay? But I want to break this down into simple, digestible pieces so that you can make it your own in a way that makes sense. Now, let's start out with the difference between default versus deliberate, okay? Before we dive into the steps of intentionality, that helps us to create more balance in our experience and not feel like we're juggling things all over the place. It's really helpful for us to first be on the same page about what intentionality is. Okay, so being intentional is about doing and thinking in a deliberate way rather than in a default way. So I'm just doing this because this is the way that I operate. This is what I've been doing, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Right, this is the familiar, so I'm just going to keep going in that direction, the default mode, okay? That's the simplest way to think about intentionality. We're going to just break it down in like simple, digestible pieces. Deliberate rather than default. Okay, so when you're feeling stuck in the juggling act of life, you're most often operating from a very default mode. And default modes are often defensive or reactive. They're just not intentional. Okay, it doesn't mean it's good, bad, right, wrong, ugly, or blah, 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 blah. We don't need to add all of those kinds of labels. It's not intentional. All right, and if we want to be able to experience more balance, less stress, then we do need to get more intentional. Okay. If you're in a default mode, it can keep you in a place of action of doing and doing and doing and going and going and going because you're doing and going in the way that you're used to doing and going. But since it's not happening with intention, it's not giving you the momentum, the clarity, the ease and flow that you are wanting. Okay, it's not, the pieces are not aligning as well as you would like them to align because default and not deliberate. So to reduce the pressure of the juggling act and instead start to experience more of a sense of balance and ease in our lives, we need to address some of those default modes, right? We need to know what they are in order to do something about it. We need to become aware of some of our default ways of operating that we've got going on in the background before we can become more deliberate about how to do it different or just how to do it more intentional. Maybe the default mode isn't so much that it's needing to be completely revamped, but because it's just happening in the background, you're just used to doing things a certain way or seeing things a certain way or thinking about things a certain way or whatever the case is, just happening on default. Since it's not being done in an intentional way or addressed in an intentional way, it's just not really been tweaked in the way it needs to be tweaked. Okay, so it doesn't mean that just because we're talking about getting deliberate rather than staying in default, that you need to revamp everything all at once. In fact, that's going to be very overwhelming. So that's not what I'm saying. I am saying that we need to be aware of some of the default modes in order to figure out if and what needs to be tweaked, addressed, what's working, what's not. Okay, so it's an assessment of sorts. So let's run through some examples of what might look like a default mode in different situations, different roles with parenting, being a professional, being a partner. Okay, so let's start with the parent. So a scenario as a parent, just a kind of common scenario. One of your kids is talking to you in a rude manner. Okay, so they're talking to you in a way that you're like, who are you talking to, right? Now, a default mode might be that you get really irritated and you react without stopping to think, and your emotions are in control of the way that you are interacting with your kid. They're being rude. I'm going to be rude back. I'm going to put them in their place. They better not. Okay. All right. an example of a default mode. Your default mode might be different, but this is just a generic example that many can relate to, okay? So if we want to shift that default mode to a more deliberate mode, it might look something like, okay, you get irritated, but you notice that you're getting irritated. You notice how you feel when they talk to you in that rude manner. And you also notice how you want to instinctively react. But then you pause and you make a conscious choice about how you really want to demonstrate to your child how to handle irritation when someone else is making a poor choice. Okay, I'm really irritated. I really want to snap back at them, but right now is an opportunity for me to demonstrate to my kid that when someone's talking to them in a rude way, they can handle it like this. I'm going to demonstrate that to them, for them. See how shifting from the default to the deliberate raises your awareness? It doesn't tell you how you can or can't think or how you can or can't feel. It acknowledges how you're thinking and feeling. And then you get a choice once you've not acknowledged that, right? Default versus deliberate. So let's talk about a scenario as a professional. Say you've got a million things on your plate and you don't know where to get started because it seems everyone is wanting something from you all at once. Okay, so maybe like this morning, I woke up, I had a bunch of things I needed to do as one of my work days, but also I had to do certain things for the kids, okay? A default mode might be I get really overwhelmed, maybe you get really overwhelmed and either lash out or shut down. And that leads you to feel less productive, less focused. And that less productive and less focused state spirals into frustration, stress, or beyond. Familiar? It's a familiar default mode for many, right? Now, a deliberate mode for this might look something like you notice that you're feeling overwhelmed because you've got a million things on your plate and you don't know where to get started because it seems like everyone's wanting something from you all at once. So you notice, all right, I'm feeling overwhelmed. I have no idea where to get started, right? You're noticing how you feel, you're noticing how you're thinking, okay? And then take a mental break from focusing on all of that. Take a mental break from focusing on all of the demands, even if only for a few moments, okay? So this doesn't need to be an hour-long break unless that's what you decide. It could be a 2-minute break, okay? And in that 2-minute break, prior to that 2-minute break, you're gonna just acknowledge, label, and have compassion towards the parts of you that are feeling overwhelmed, because you know why? Heck yeah. They're allowed to feel overwhelmed with all those million things on their plate, with all these different people pulling them in all different directions. Of course they feel overwhelmed, right? So you're going to acknowledge the parts of you that are feeling overwhelmed and just have some compassion towards them. Like, yes, I get it. Like, I get it. All right. And then in that few-minute break or however long mental break you decide to take, you're going to consciously make a decision about how you would like to proceed from this calmer space, which is inherent. If you're taking the time to notice how you're thinking and to notice how you're feeling, and then to engage with those thoughts and feelings with compassion, there is an auto response that you're cultivating within you that's going to pull this calmer place up for you to connect with. All right. And that's going to give you a pocket of calm or clarity, a pocket of just a little bit less frustration, right? Where you can then consciously make a decision about how you would like to proceed from that calmer space. Okay, so you're not focused on controlling everything or everyone. That's not what we're talking about. You're not focused on controlling all of your emotions or all of your thoughts. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what getting deliberate is about. That's not what intentionality is about, okay? Let's do another scenario, see if that continues to help paint the picture of what I'm talking about here. So another scenario would be as a partner. All right. So you and your partner are arguing and it's really bothering you. Maybe you think you're right. Maybe they think they're right, whatever the case is. Okay. So you and your partner are arguing and it's really bothering you. A default mode for how to deal with that might be you get mad or sad or scared and you react from that place. You do or say something that's either unhelpful or that you later wish you hadn't done or said. Okay. Common default mode for plenty of people. Okay. So what would be a deliberate mode, a deliberate response instead of that default response? Well, it might be, hey, I notice I'm feeling bothered. I'm going to label that. I feel bothered right now. I feel bothered because I think I'm right and they're wrong, or I think they're treating me wrong, or whatever the case is. I feel bothered. I feel mad. I feel scared. I feel sad. Okay. And then I'm going to ask myself, what do I really need from me right now? Given how I'm feeling, what do I need from me? Given how you're feeling, you just labeled how you're feeling, maybe even how you're thinking. Ask yourself, what do you really need from yourself in these moments? Before making any big decisions about what to say or do, this is what you do. Get deliberate. This is how I'm feeling. I'm having these thoughts, I'm having these feelings. What do I need from me right here, right now? What do I need from me right here, right now, before I make any decisions or say anything? And then after you've taken the time that you need, you can more consciously address your partner, expressing the emotions that you need to express in a more clear and helpful manner. Right? Now, these are just some common examples that might apply to you, or you might be able to relate to in some way to get your mind thinking of other ways that you may be operating in default rather than in deliberate mode in important areas of your life. All right. It's a place to start. There are many other ways that these scenarios could play out, and you'd need to practice some self-awareness and get creative in how to apply them to your particular life situation and circumstance. But simply being willing to explore what your default is and what you would like your deliberate to be is an amazing start. It's already you getting more intentional. Already you getting more intentional. And if you want to step back a little bit more and have just a more general question to ask yourself before you even go applying this to specific areas of your life, like parent, partner, professional, a good question to ask yourself, sit back, ask yourself and honestly answer is, as I'm trying to juggle everything, how do I really tend to operate in most facets of my life? If I'm honest with myself, am I most often running on more of a default mode or more of a deliberate one? And just honestly answer that question. It's going to help you get an idea of where you're at, more deliberate, more default, and where you want to be, more deliberate, more default. Okay. Now let's talk a bit about balance versus control. So all this ties in together. When we think about life as a juggling act, it automatically sets up this kind of mental picture of us walking on tight ropes in the air, working hard to prevent anything from falling because we're juggling all these balls in the air through our hands, right? And so there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of constriction, there's a lot of like fear that something's going to fall. Got to keep it up, right? We don't want to paint that mental picture. It doesn't feel good. Not a great way to think about life, right? So balance is actually a term that I think is more fitting here, as it helps us to really start to move in a direction that we can begin to associate with less stress and urgency than the juggling act mental picture that many of us can understand and have seen in our heads before. The trouble is that when people use the word balance nowadays, they tend to really be talking about control, and they are not the same thing. So I want to differentiate that so that balance can be a term that can serve you rather than work against you. When people talk about how do I balance it all, just like how do I juggle it all, right? What they're really asking is how can I control everything? No, balance and control are not the same. Okay. By trying to control everything all the time, it's unhelpful, it's more stressful, and it really sets us up for failure because we can't do it. All right. So it's unhealthy, it's impractical. Balance isn't actually about control at all. but it does require intention, which is why it ties very nicely with what we're talking about here today. Intention isn't about control either. So it frees us up. If we use the term balance, separate that from control, and understand that balance is about intention, right? It frees us up from this impossible pressure that comes along with kind of the old conventional frameworks of the juggling act and getting everything done and having this whole percentage of balance in this pie of life, and right, it frees us up from all the pressure of figuring all of that out, right? So that we can breathe, rest, and relax into this being a process that allows for ebb and flow and doesn't call for tight grasping of control. Okay, so with this in mind, you might be wondering how to move from the default to the deliberate so that you can experience more of that balance. Don't worry, I've got you. I'm going to share these steps with you now, and you can go ahead and try them on your own whenever you're ready at your own discretion. And what I will say is the steps I'm going to break down for you right now are steps that you can use in real time. But if you want to take this even further, you can use an intentional scheduler to begin your day with, and go even further and end your day with it too, but at least begin your day with an intentional scheduler. I'll link that below. I've got a free PDF template version, and I've got a $20 mini course version, both of which they're going to serve you immensely to help you be intentional with how you are spending your time and expending your energy throughout your day, each day as well, in a very simple to use, not overly complicated method that honestly, I still use this. I've been using it for years. It's changed my life for the better in so many ways. So I'll link that below. All right. So here are a few simple steps to get you started. There's 4 of them. Here's the first one. 1, identify the default mode. Okay. Identify the default mode that is not working out well or isn't working the way that you want it to. Knowing what you don't like or what you want to see change, it can serve as a starting place. Okay. Now you can use the example scenarios that I've shared so far as a point of reference to help you with this, to help get your brain thinking about, all right, there's some areas maybe where there's default modes happening that I want to shift or I just don't like, or whatever the case is. Okay. Number 2, now that you know what you want to see change, write down why you want this default mode to change. Why do you want this default mode to change? Because to be honest, if you don't have a good reason why you want it to change, it ain't gonna change. Sorry. Okay. So we need to know why you want it to change. What difference would it make for your life? What benefits will come from this change? What will be different, and why does that matter to you? All right. You're going to take time with this and write it down. And then number 3, now that you're clear on what default mode you want to see change and why, then you have what you need to get more intentional about how to navigate some of these things that are going to be coming up for you as you think through the steps 1 and 2. All right. You have more information so that you can begin to get more intentional with these next steps moving forward as well. I want you to ask yourself, how do I want to experience this instead? All right. So you're clear on your default mode and why you want to see that change. And you're going to ask yourself, how do I want to experience this instead? Getting clear on how you actually want to experience your interactions with your children, your partner, or other professionals is going to give your intention a point of focus. Intention, attention. When we have that, confusion goes down, clarity goes up. All right. And then step number 4, as you engage with the people, the places, or things that used to activate or trigger that default mode for you that you've identified. And step 1, start to practice noticing when that default mode is about to kick in so that you can deliberately shift your attention to ways that you can show up in those moments that actually help you experience more of what you have identified you want to experience instead. You might need to pause this, go back, rewind, and listen to it again. That's okay. Or if you really want a guidebook, my book, The Reset, High Achiever's Guide to Freedom and Fulfillment, it's available on Amazon, and it walks you through every single step with complete opportunity to personalize every single step with prompts and exercises to last you every day for a minimum of 8 weeks so that you can really reset the areas that are in default and make them more deliberate, right? If you want that guidebook, you can head over to Amazon to grab that, okay? But these 4 steps are a really great way to start, okay? These 4 steps, they might seem simple. They are. But simple and easy aren't the same. So be patient with yourself as you practice them, okay? It's going to take time for your default mode to shift and for your deliberate mode to kick in more naturally. This is the process that I call the reset, okay? And I expand upon it significantly more in the reset book. So go ahead and grab that. This is really like pulling you in. All right. One of the ways that I help myself practice intentionally being deliberate, so intentionality more deeply on a regular basis, is by using what I mentioned earlier, which is my intentional scheduler. Okay. Now, maybe you already have one, or maybe you've thought of getting one, but really an intentional scheduler that allows you to integrate the various aspects of yourself and your life all in one place, clear, succinct, but intentional, right? In a way that's like, yes, this is where I want to focus. Okay. Having that guide my morning every morning makes such a difference that on the days I don't do it, I feel the difference. I can feel the difference. Even after using it for years and years, I can feel the difference if I don't use it. Okay, so if you don't have a means of helping yourself to practice intentionality in this really clear, succinct, regular way, and you want something like that that's going to help you to balance the work, the parenting, the health, and other relationships, then go ahead and you can either download the free PDF that I link below, or you can use the $20 mini course that really walks through all the brain science and all the things that make it really effective and ways to implement it. Go ahead and click that, okay? Because it is going to be gold if you actually show up for it and try it out for a few days. Do it for at least 10 days, okay? And see what difference it makes for you. All right, now this 4-step practice that I've outlined for you here, it's going to help if you practice that each day. It's going to help bring more balanced experience into your day-to-day life, which then reduces that pressure of the juggling act, the stress of the juggling act, right? And is going to allow you to be more intentional with how you're showing up in your schedule, in your relationships, with your energy, all of the things. And that, my friend, is how we juggle, air quotes, modern day parenting and work and partnership and all that stuff. Because when we do this, it helps us to become more focused and more present when we want, where we want, with whom we want. That's power. That's freedom, right? So these 4 steps are enough to get you started with making a really meaningful difference in your life, in your relationships, at work, and at home. When you're ready to build it further, if you want to build it further, you can go ahead, grab the additional steps with any of the pieces I've shared below, the intentional scheduler, the free PDF, or the reset book on Amazon. All of them are going to be a significant benefit if you want to go deeper, further, and wider with this. All right. So thank you so much for joining me today. Questions, comments, contributions, leave them below. I love connecting with you all. I hope you have an amazing day. Go out and be more intentional and see